So I just finished watching the show Mr. Robot that a lot of people have been recommending to me for a very long time. I watched the final episode last night and I've had some time to kind of collect my thoughts on the series, and I did want to make a video about it. However, it is a very difficult series to attempt to review because it's the kind of show where every couple episodes there's some big revelation or reveal or twist that retroactively changes everything that you've just watched and is required information to understand everything that comes later in the series. For instance, there's a huge twist at the end of season 1, and you can't really talk about seasons 2, 3, and 4 unless you are aware of and understand what that twist is. So to just do a general review of Mr. Robot without giving away anything, I really couldn't talk about the show at all. But I will attempt to do a non-spoiler section and then get into some of the grittier details as this review goes on. But I'm kind of at a little bit of a loss, you know? I really am not sure how to even begin to attempt to review this show, but I'm going to do my best. So Mr. Robot is a 4-season show that was created, written a lot of episodes by, and directed most of the episode by Sam Esmail. So he's kind of the spearheader throughout this entire series and what it's all about. He's the mastermind, and he created this character named Elliot Alderson, who is basically this extremely psychologically damaged human being, this introverted, drug addicted, like mentally damaged person who happens to be like one of the world's greatest hackers, right? And even in his free time, he just winds up hacking people. And for the most part, he's doing it just so that he understands everybody around him. Like, he decides that he hacks everybody, right? Everybody that he meets, he goes in and tries to figure out all their dirty details and everything. But he starts doing kind of vigilante-like things, like he's taken down, you know, pedophiles and stuff like that. In the very first episode, that's the first thing you see him do. Basically threatens this guy and, you know, has his whole life basically, you know, destroyed because he found out this thing about him. And that's kind of what he's been doing behind the scenes. But he gets found out by this group of bigger hackers that basically have decided that they want to take down all of these corporations, particularly this corporation named E Corp that they name Evil Corp, and, you know, erase the debt records and try to, you know, liberate the people. Basically like, you know, the Fight Club scenario. And there's definite like heavy Fight Club influences, particularly in the first season. I will say the show goes well beyond that, but you can see the influences in it. But I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think that it worked pretty well for the show. So he gets recruited by this guy named Mr. Robot, who is the head of this kind of hacker group, and starts working with them a little bit. But, you know, problems kind of arise as things go on. And when you get into the further seasons, there are like secret societies like named the Dark Army. And suffice to say, the storyline gets way more complex as things go along. And, you know, people's lives get put on the line. People need to be killed off in order to be silenced. And you never really know who is working for any of these underground corporations or how much influence they actually have within them. All the while we are following a character that can't even keep who he is in his head straight as he tries to figure out what to do in these dangerous situations, as well as, you know, what is the right thing to do, what is the moral thing to do, while also trying to figure out who these people actually are that are recruiting him. He has a vendetta against E Corp because they are a corporation that contributed to the death of his father, who used to work for them, as well as his best friend Angela, who the same thing happened to her parents, so they have a connection there. And there's many minor and major antagonists that come up along the way. Most of the time, you don't even realize how important somebody is going to be to the story or the show until many episodes later, and it kind of makes you go back and think. I think it's probably the kind of show that would be better on rewatches. Not that the first experience wasn't enjoyable, but I think that, you know, because of all the different revelations that you have and all the twists and turns, I think it's the kind of show that once you understand what's going on, if you go back and rewatch it, it's probably going to make more sense. I've only watched it once so far, so bear with me. But yeah, it definitely seems to be like that kind of show. Its tone, I would say, is mostly dramatic, although there are some moments that are like extremely dark comedy or just pure comedy based that happen throughout it. But then it also does have moments that really take you by surprise and shock you and kind of like pulled the rug out from under you, and some deeply, deeply, powerfully emotional moments with the characters. Rami Malek, who plays the lead character, just blew me out of the water with this one. I've hardly ever seen anything that he's done before. I've seen a couple of movies that he was in, but this show really, really, like, I definitely want to pay more attention to further stuff that he does with movies or television or anything, because this guy, I mean, he carries the show. There's other characters that are super important, but, you know, being the main character and all of the huge emotional moments that he has to do, you know, I was just blown away by his performance. I think it's one of the better lead performances that I've seen in a show in a long time. And I was also happy to see that Christian Slater is a main character in the show. I literally did not know that going in. And Christian Slater has always been one of my favorite actors. I'm a huge fan of True Romance and Heathers and like a lot of his early work. I'm a huge Christian Slater fan. So that was just kind of like the cherry on top for me. That was like quite a delight to see that Christian Slater is not only in the show, but he's a main character. So I was like totally on board for that. There's other great characters like Angela and Darlene, who are also fantastic in the show. Now, there's a character named Tyrell, and I don't want to get into spoilers right now, but he's somebody that I was really interested early on in the show, but then I felt kind of fell apart for me as the show went on, but I'll get into that in the spoiler section. But basically what you can look forward to if you haven't seen the show before is that, you know, it does get very dark. You would say that the first season is a lot about like the hacking aspect, and so there's a lot of like computer jargon in there that like I didn't really understand, but the characters are engaging enough that you can kind of follow them through what they're doing, and based upon what they're trying to achieve, you could still be on board with things despite how intricate like the hacking stuff gets. Actually, I have a friend of mine that works in IT, and he was talking about watching some of the first season, and he was like, it's actually extremely accurate to a lot of the stuff that he's aware of. You know, he went to school for all that kind of stuff. So, you know, at least the stuff that they're doing in the show is, you know, legitimate. So if you're really into computers and, you know, that kind of shit, you might get something a little bit more out of it than I did. You know, I'm very much drawn to deep character work, and that's what I like to see. I like to see character development over time and discovering things about characters. And I always say characters are the most important things that you can put into a story, whether it's a movie, show, a book, or whatever it is because you know, it shows reflections of ourselves at the same time. And I think that dealing with a show like Mr. Robot, that applies even more so than usual when you get into kind of the spoiler stuff of the show that I'm trying to avoid. But watching Rami Malek's acting throughout some of the show, particularly in season 4, just was absolutely phenomenal. And it was just so compelling the entire way through that his character alone really kept me engaged. I don't think it's a perfect show. There are some things I had issues with. There's some like artistic things I have issues with, and there's some character things I have issues with. But overall, the things I don't is the entire character arc of Elliot and Mr. Robot and all of that stuff. I thought was just done so well. And I think the show is really fantastic at building tension. I think it's fantastic at giving you those twists and giving you those revelations. Characters will die when you least expect them to. And they also take particular episodes to do creative frameworks with those episodes. Like, for instance, there's an episode that I love, I think in season 3, where the first half of the episode is Elliot inside of a building trying to get out of it as it's being evacuated. And then, you know, he has to go through like all these intricacies, and he's doing, you know, things that he has to do before he has to leave the building. And as he exits the building, he encounters the character of Angela, who has to go back into the building for another reason. And then we follow her going through the building, but now things are way worse. Now, like, the evacuation's been, you know, it's been like almost fully evacuated, but now there's people in there with guns, and just like it becomes this sort of like 2-part episode that just follows one character through like the obstacles to leave the building, and then the other character through all the obstacles to go back into the building. It was just a really creative setup for an episode. There is an episode, I shared an image of this on Twitter when I was watching it, that goes into like a full 90s sitcom style. And there are like, well, 80s and 90s, and there are crossovers with characters from like 80s and 90s TV shows that show up that I never would have expected to see in a drama series in a million years. Really funny, but also like darkly messed up when you think about why it's happening. And then in the final season, there's an episode that is my favorite episode, probably most people's favorite episode, I think, from like looking up some things about the show afterwards, where it's done in like a 5-act structure, and it all takes place in one apartment room, and it's just like one of the best episodes of anything I've ever watched. Now, I do have one major gripe with the series that is still non-spoiler that I will get into, and this is just a me problem. This is not a problem with the show itself. It is just an aesthetic choice that I personally was not a fan of. I understand why they did it because, you know, it's a very disorienting show and it's meant to put you kind of in the mental state of the characters, and I completely understand it. But for me, every time they did this, it took me out of the show where like you want to be immersed in the series. Every single time I saw this, I was taken out of the show and I was frustrated with looking at it. And some of you might know what I mean. And it's some of the camera work in the show because a lot of the times, you know, you'll see a show and they'll shoot a character kind of like this, where they're in like a third of the frame, right? So you're looking at the frame, and because we read left to right, you know, it's like the rule of thirds or whatever it is. You know, they'll do that, or they'll have characters dead center in the frame, right? So both of those are pretty common. Mr. Robot does this style where it will put the camera close up on a character's face, and there'll be all this empty space above them. And it's incredibly distracting. So basically, it'll look like this. So they'll be down here, like they'll be standing up, right? They'll be standing up, but they'll be down here, and like this is the shot, and they'll be talking just like normally in like a normal scene. And I understand that it's a stylistic, artistic choice. Oh, but it frustrates the fuck out of me. I could not stand looking at it. I just, every single time they did that, I would get so annoyed, and I'm sorry. And probably like Mr. Robot fan purists are going to like hate me for that opinion, but it's just a specific stylistic choice that did not vibe with me. And every time I saw it, it just completely took me out of the show. And I just didn't like it. However, the story and the acting in particular and the character work was what kept me the most engaged and made me overall really, really enjoy the show. Particularly, like I said, with Elliot, but also characters like Angela and Darlene. You know, they do some really, really great stuff with them, but it's hard to talk about any of it without getting into spoilers. So what I will say is I recommend the show. It's a dark drama. It's going to get very, very dark at times. You're dealing with psychologically damaged characters. So if you are, you know, sensitive to that kind of stuff, then maybe it's not your cup of tea. Also, like the earlier seasons, I would say I like season 1 a lot. Season 2, I would say kind of went downhill, kind of got like really, really exposition heavy for me. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but it was definitely the weakest. Season 3, I think, is a huge step up, has some of my favorite episodes, including that building episode. And then season 4, I would say every episode of season 4 is great. Particularly like the second half. Well, all of it. All of season 4 was great. So I think if you can handle kind of a rocky start, maybe, I think that if you attach and get yourself on board with these characters, then and get yourself invested enough, I think seasons 3 and 4 will make that build up worth it entirely for you. So minus a few aesthetic difficulties I had, along with a few character choices that I can't talk about without spoilers, I would say overall I really, really enjoyed the show. I probably give it like a solid 8 out of 10 in its entirety. But now I'm going to get into spoilers and talk about specific things that I liked. So if you don't want to know any spoilers, this would be the time to vacate the video. Okay, so obviously the big twist, the big revelation of the show that you need to understand is that Elliot has multiple personality disorder, and Mr. Robot is one of those personalities. Mr. Robot is the character that Christian Slater plays, who is also an image of Elliot's father. And so this is like a 3-part twist that happens at the end of season 1, because first, you realize that Darlene is his sister because he starts to get attracted to her and tries to kiss her. And she's like, Elliot, what are you doing? Like, not realizing that it was his sister for this whole season. Okay. And then he goes back and finds out that Mr. Robot is his father. And then you find out that his father, because his father died years ago, this is a alternate personality that Elliot created in order to protect himself. And a lot of the show deals with like the psychiatric aspect of these characters. He has a therapist that he goes and talks to, and he's trying to figure out all these things from his childhood. I thought that Christian Slater did a great job at acting out all of the differences between the versions of Elliot's father that you see, because obviously Mr. Robot is not who Elliot's father really was. It's not the person that Elliot remembers, and it even goes darker than that you find out in season 4. So Christian Slater is essentially playing Elliot himself, but an alternate personality, but he's playing the protector figure of his father inside of his mind, who is also orchestrating all of these things that the hackers are doing. But also at the same time, there's these flashbacks that we see Elliot as a child and his father, either getting sick or starting up the business. So he's playing like the real version of his father that Elliot remembers. And he's also playing the version that Elliot has created in his mind. So I just want to say that even though Rami Malek is obviously on display a lot more in terms of acting and performance, I want to give it up to Christian Slater because, he has to play all these different versions of Mr. Robot, of Elliot's father, throughout the entire series. And I thought that reveal at the end of season 1 was done phenomenally. And although it is, very Fight Club-esque, right, because you're dealing with an alternate personality who plans on taking down these corporations and, eliminating the debt of all of these people, it's a similar thing. But after season 1, it really delves into very, very different territory and entering into getting connected with, like, the Dark Army and White Rose and all that. And White Rose, great villain, but frustrated the fuck out of me. Like, I hated that character so much. I was so annoyed by that character, but that just means that they were playing their role really, really well. Also, the guy, I can't remember the character's name. The guy that works for the Dark Army, who always wore the suit, kind of like the nerdy guy with glasses. Incredibly intimidating, and you wouldn't expect him to be. Like, there's a scene where he just kills somebody with an axe out of nowhere, and you're just like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Really, really great character. I also was heavily invested in Angela's storyline. I thought that she was very sympathetic. I liked her relationship with Elliot and how weird it was. They were friends, but then they were more than that, but also they had their own things going on. And I really liked how it unfolded. With her kind of never backing down from what she was trying to do. And I will say that when they killed her character off in season 4 in the first episode, that was probably one of the most shocking deaths I've seen. I would put it just under, another spoiler for Better Call Saul, I'm sorry. I would put it just under Howard's death from Better Call Saul in terms of, gunshot to the head out of nowhere. If you're ranking characters that you didn't expect to die to a gunshot in the head out of nowhere, it would be Howard and then Angela. And that devastated me because season 3 ends with this cliffhanger where you find out that Price was her father and that she's not backing down from this and everything. And season 4 starts in the same scene. It was such a creative decision. I loved it from like a filmmaking standpoint, but from like a character, liking the character, I was devastated. But from like a filmmaking standpoint, that was incredible. They basically like had the cliffhanger from season 3 begin season 4, replayed the same scene and added an extra minute to it where she dies. And it's just like, that's how season 4 starts. And you're just like, what the hell is going on? So that was great. Now I want to get into Tyrell a little bit because here's the thing with Tyrell. Okay. Season 1. All right. I thought Tyrell was going to be a great villain. I was really excited to see because he was kind of like a more like whinier version of like Patrick Bateman, like this businessman that was like, doing all this crazy shit behind the scenes, like beating up homeless people and like banging chicks, banging dudes. Like he's just doing everything, man. I don't even know. And he was like figuring out Elliot right away. Like he was very suspicious of him. Like he was a very smart character. I really liked everything they were doing with Tyrell early on. But then there's a scene where he murders somebody and then he kind of goes into hiding for a while. And then you don't see him for like almost a full season. And then when he comes back, he's kind of just like a Mr. Robot fanboy and never really like, I'm not saying his character arc was bad, but I guess it was just not where I wanted his character to go. And so, like, seeing Tyrell after season 2, I was always disappointed with what they did with him. I always thought they could have done a little bit more with Tyrell. Again, not saying what they did with him was bad, but it's just like the build up, like his introduction and all the weird shit he was doing in season 1. I was like, this guy is unhinged. Like, I want to see more of him. And then they just don't really, like, he just kind of becomes like he's with Mr. Robot, he's with Elliot, like he's like he looks up to him and everything, and he's like trying to do the best that he can, and then they put him into hiding for a while. People are trying to come after him. That part was kind of cool, but I just wish they would have done more with him. I'm always a fan of like conspiracy theories and secret societies and stuff. I love the I don't love the idea because I kind of think it's true, but I know there's people running the world that are doing all these shady things behind the scenes. And so when you got into the introduction of the Dark Army and everything, I liked everything that they kind of implied with that, like the idea to control humanity and how they incorporated, social media and the internet and how everything was kind of designed to dissuade people away from looking into them the way that Elliot and everyone else were, where they could kind of just do their business behind the scenes, and acquire all this kind of ultimate power. And it worked really well as like an antagonistic force because you have the technology aspect of it, or building this big machine or whatever that they were doing towards the end. And then, but you also had the visceral kind of physical fear of it because they had assassins and they would, kill you, out of nowhere. Like there was a couple attacks where they would just send people, and there was that woman, I can't remember her name either, but the big woman from season 4 that was kind of intimidating the police officer character, just unexpectedly terrifying, just like you wouldn't expect. You'd expect somebody like that to be like nice and wholesome and like baking you cookies, but instead she's gonna murder your entire family and threatening to kill your mom in front of you and shit, and you're just like, what? But the other things that I want to talk about are in season 4. I think that, and after I watched the episode, I obviously had to look some stuff up about it because I was just so blown away. And it's turns out to be probably the highest rated Mr. Robot episode, and probably the one that most people like the best. And it's season 4, episode 7, which is the 5-act structure episode that they attempt to do, where the entire episode takes place in the apartment building of Elliot's therapist while they are being held at gunpoint by this criminal that was introduced in season 1 that came back, who is compelling in his own way, like absolutely terrifying in his own way. But he goes through this whole method to try to understand why Elliot developed Mr. Robot and his alternate personalities and stuff. And the thing that's creepy about this villain is that, on the surface, he seems like just a thug, but he actually is very empathetic and also like has this intimate bond, or wants to build this intimate bond with Elliot over their trauma. And it's so like creepy because it's like, they are being threatened by him in the moment, but he is also doing more work than anybody else has ever done to get Elliot to like come to terms with all these horrible things that have happened to him. And it's like, it puts you in a very conflicting spot as the viewer, of how you feel about this. And it basically forces Elliot to have this therapy session, unveiling kind of the truth about his actual real life father. And this is a really heartbreaking moment. It's a very heartbreaking episode where you basically uncover that, Elliot's father sexually abused him when he was younger. And then you think about, and it put into context the whole show, because it really made me think about the idea of this father figure, right, that he created. And what's a father supposed to do? A father is supposed to protect his child, right? Like, you're supposed to provide and protect for your children. And, you're supposed to be that barrier in between them and the harsh realities of the real world. And, that's what you were supposed to do. So the idea that Elliot created a protector in the image of his father, even though his real father was a horrible person, it's really, really heartbreaking to uncover that. Not to mention, Rami Malek's performance during that scene, but it also recontextualizes everything in the show, because the very first thing that we saw Elliot do in the show was hack and take down a pedophile. And that's what his father was. And it just, like, I don't know, like, there's something really, really emotional about that. I'm just like, even thinking about it now, I'm just like getting emotional about it. I'm like, because your father is supposed to be the one to protect you, and it's like, he broke him from such an early age. And and it's not just the father figure, the protector. It's it skewed his entire vision of his family. It made him, he forgot his sister. He locked his true personality away. He developed the Elliot that we know, because in the further episodes, in like the final episodes, big spoiler, I'm in the spoiler section, so it is what it is. You find out that the Elliot that we've been following throughout the whole show is just another personality. And he developed a personality for his mother, a child version for himself, his father, basically his entire family. And yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that really, really hurt me when I watched it. It was a really, really hard episode to get through. And a lot of that's because of the performances, but also, you think about these parental things, and, how your father is supposed to protect you, and how dark the world actually gets, and how easy it is to be corrupted. And Elliot himself, does some horrible things throughout the show as well, even though it all, began with good intentions. And then there's moments where he's at odds with the Mr. Robot character inside of his mind, and like there's different personalities trying to achieve different things. But it all just hurt, because you realize like how dark and sadistic and power hungry the world actually is when you think about the corporations themselves. And I know it's kind of like maybe a cheesy trope to say like, oh, corporations are evil, but when you look at the people that are usually in charge and the methods that they had to go in order to get there, it's like you wonder when that slippery slope started. You wonder how you go from being sort of a neutral, innocent, child. Like, what are the traumatic things that break you along the way, that change you into the kind of person that would be willing to do this, that would be willing to, not care and blow up all these buildings when people are still in it for the greater good, right? Or just, be able to threaten when Elliot threatens the woman that he was seeing in season 4 to get like the passcode that he needed, and like kind of like pushed her back into like harming herself. Or even how Angela's father, that she didn't even know, right? And how he was trying to protect her and ultimately failed. And it's kind of just like, is that inevitable? Is it just like inevitable that like as a parental figure or as a authority figure that at some point you are going to fail at protecting the person you're supposed to protect? At some point you're going to make some horrible choice. At some point you're going to do something that hurts somebody. And maybe, the point of making that episode like a therapy session, and maybe the point of having these psychologically damaged main characters is to kind of show us, or give us an idea of how to trace it back and pinpoint those moments, those events, or those triggers, or the things that made us shift perspectives in our mind in order to protect ourselves. Did we shut a particular memory out? Did we change ourselves because of one event that happened? Like, I don't know. It's just really, really interesting stuff to think about. And if a show or a piece of art or a piece of fiction makes you start thinking about these things, I think it's definitely worth investing your time into if you're kind of interested in that sort of stuff. Anyways, going along with that, I thought the finale of the series was good. I thought it was interesting how they took the final 3 episodes and changed directions completely. They basically wrapped everything up, and then the final 3 episodes explore the deepest crevices of Elliot's mind. But I thought that was needed with a show like this, because although there is this overarching plot going on of taking down the Dark Army and all this kind of stuff, I mean, the show really does focus on the psychological aspect of its main character, and that was kind of the premise from the get-go. That's where most of the twists, have their biggest impact. So I think ending the show dealing with the psychology of the main character was important to do. So yeah, overall, I really, really did enjoy it. I had a lot of fun with the series, and I don't know if fun is the right word with some of these episodes, but definitely a lot of them really got me thinking. And a lot of them got a lot of emotion out of me, which is what a show should do. What a good show should do is, get you to feel things or to get you to viscerally react to stuff, which I definitely did. I do have a few gripes with the show. Certain character arcs, that didn't really feel fulfilling to me, as well as, some of the artistic choices and the camera work and stuff really, really bugged me. But overall, definitely enjoyed the show. I think it would be better on a rewatch, but I have so many goddamn shows I need to get to and watch, or other shows to rewatch. So I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, maybe sometime in the future. But until then, I would say I recommend it. I enjoyed it. Like I said, overall, I'd probably give it like an 8 out of 10. Really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I'd recommend it. So if you guys have seen Mr. Robot, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Leave all your thoughts, ideas, opinions about the show down there. And if you did enjoy it, tell me the reasons why you liked it the most. And if you didn't enjoy it, tell me what kind of turned you off about it. Just all comments that you want to down below, as well as like the video to help it out in the algorithm. I'd really appreciate it. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.